Hi, and thank you for joining us today. Today we are going to welcome Charlcie Vann talking about the Green Book. The Green Book was also the basis of a movie which was an Academy Award winner, available on DVD here at the library, so we hope you'll take the opportunity to check it out. This is the third program in our adult summer reading program. And being an adult summer reading program, we have a secret word which we will give you sometime during the program that you can use in your mission. Remember that if you are signed up for the Adult Summer Reading Program, if you get 1,500 points, you are eligible for a random drawing for a $100 gift card. And if you get 3,000 points, you're eligible for the drawing for a $250 gift card. And each program mission is worth 500 points. So stay tuned, and you will see the secret word sometime during the program. But in the meantime, we do want to welcome Charlcie Vann from Jacksonville State University to talk with us about the Green Book. Charlcie, turning it over to you.
Hello, my name is Charlcie Pettway Vann, and I'm honored to be here today to give you a brief history of the Green Book. I'll give you a little bit of background about myself. I am a librarian. I've been a librarian for 30-ish years. And I'm just blessed to be here. I am a reference librarian and psychology librarian at JSU. And in August, I'll be moving to my new position as being the Director of Diversity and Inclusion, and which has always been a dream of mine as well. So I'm just blessed for both opportunities. And today I want to give you a brief history of the Green Book. I know a few years ago you guys probably knew of the movie, and a lot of people weren't aware of the Green Book before that movie. I was fortunate enough to be aware of the Green Book as a little child. I am born, I'm a Yankee by birth, but Southerner by nature. I was born in New Jersey, but my family is from Wilcox County, Alabama. And that's Lower Alabama, if you guys are not familiar with that area, near Selma, and it's called Camden, near Gee's Bend. And you'll probably see a lot of people named Pettway, and that's my maiden name, Pettway, from Gee's Bend area. And my parents were born in Alabama, and my grandparents were as well. So every summer, I took trips from New Jersey to Alabama just to visit and see my grandparents. And one of the ways that my grandparents and my parents would maneuver their way to New Jersey and New York, where some of our family is located, they use the Green Book. During the early 1900s until maybe the mid-70s, the Green Book was, well, at that point, we started having the Great Migration, and that was right during the time of Jim Crow. Jim Crow was prevalent during that time. So that was one of the reasons, especially in the South, that a lot of people, especially people of color, African Americans, they wanted to have a different way of life, maybe a better way of life. So during that time, that era, a lot of people moved to the North, to the Midwest, to the West. And if you can see here from the 2000 U.S. Census report, and it tells you between the years maybe 1910 to 1999, there was a great migration of people, African American people, moved from the South going elsewhere. And they were just seeking maybe a better way of life to get away from some of the restrictions that they found in the South. This is a little diagram, and it's exactly what happened to a lot of my relatives. They moved from the South, and a lot of us settled in Chicago, in New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Ohio, a lot of those places there. Now, during the, Second World War, a lot of Americans, not just Black Americans, but a lot of Americans started traveling. They used their cars. They did a lot of traveling with their own family vehicles. And in order to travel freely, one of the best ways, African American families decided to start using their own vehicles to travel out of state and sometimes go on vacations and whatnot. And it was a better way to maybe not deal with a lot of the restrictions that you had with Jim Crow. And if you're not familiar with Jim Crow, there were a set of laws and statutes that mandated separation of the races. Jim Crow there was one to make sure that it separated whites from non-whites in nearly every aspect of life. By schools, we had separate, but a lot of us know it wasn't equal. Parks, libraries, drinking fountains, restaurants, restrooms, buses, trains, hospitals, doctor's office. Everything was separate. It was against the law, and it was lawful. It was against the law for them to mix together, the waiting rooms and whatnot. And this is just a little diagram of how life was. The one thing that I just didn't understand, that everyone always had to pay the same price, but they didn't get the same service. So that was something that's a little disheartening about that. But it just wasn't fair at all and wasn't equal to all of its citizens. Some examples of, you would see a lot of signs saying colored only, white only. This was something that was just commonplace. And the disheartening part of it, they would kind of group individuals as if they weren't human. Lots of times, no pets, no dogs, no Negroes, no Mexicans, all those things that people would lump together and say who they would serve. And if they served you at all, you would have to go to the rear or the back of a business in order to get service. Now, one of the best ways, as I said before, in order to travel better, and you wouldn't have to be subjected to discrimination, is having your own vehicle, having your own car. You can get in there and go where you wanted to go without being subject to those types of laws. So you didn't have Jim Crow in your car. You could just go and be free. However, as we all know, there are still going to be restrictions. What if you have to go to the bathroom? What if you need to get something to eat? Where's the long journey and you needed to go somewhere to rest for the night? As you can see, this family here traveling, you would always have some empty pots and pans, and guess what those pots were for? Going to the bathroom. Yes, because you weren't welcome to use the bathrooms in public some places. If they had one at all, for at that time, people were called colored bathrooms or Negro bathrooms. So you had to be prepared. When traveling, we couldn't just spontaneously get up and go somewhere. You had to really plan out your trip. And planning the trip wasn't just because of convenience or lack of convenience. It was a matter of life and death. Because if you did not actually plan that trip well, you may not arrive at your destination. So it was extremely important for African Americans and people of color. Even Jewish people also had to have certain places, and they had a book as well that would govern where they could stop, where they were welcomed, and where they were not. Here's an example here, and you all can read this as well. There were homes. Some people opened up their homes and had it as a lodging, or kind of like a bed and breakfast type of place, you wanted to say, that would welcome folks of color. And that was wonderful. And the word of mouth came out. And after a while, people knew where they could go, where they were welcome, and where they were not. So that was a wonderful thing to always know that. And as I mentioned before, it was somewhat dangerous to travel and be in certain places, and if you hadn't already planned your trip. These are examples of signs that we located dealing with colored only restaurants as well as hotels, as you can see. And there also were places that you had to really plan your trip well, because there were sundown towns. And sundown towns is just that. you better be out of town when the sun goes down. And that's what that meant. And it was by law. You could get picked up by the police, or the KKK, or whomever that might have just said, okay, you're a person that you're not white, you're over here, why are you here? They could harass you, beat you, kill you, and it would be because they say that you weren't out of town before sundown. And this wasn't just a southern thing. This was all around United States. There were lots of sundown. From New York to California to Ohio, Michigan, there were sundown towns. So when people of color traveled, it had to be a really planned out event in order to arrive safely. Now, when I found out about this book, and my grandparents had the Green Book on their shelves when I was a little girl. I remember these things so vividly, and I should have known then I wanted to be a librarian, because I would just look in there and read how this thing is arranged and I didn't even know the word catalog, but that's what I was looking for. How is it set up? How is it arranged in the book? And that's what I knew. I should have known then that I wanted to be a librarian. But the Green Book was a wonderful book. And when I realized and I did my research and found out that the person that actually came up with the Green Book, last name was Green, it was just like, of course, it made sense. Now, in 1936, Mr. Victor Hugo Green, he created the Green Book. And guess what Mr. Green was? He was a postal worker. Mr. Green was a postal worker. So what better person that would know certain areas and know how to look up information but Mr. Green? Now, he was born in Harlem, and he was a postal worker that worked in New Jersey, my home state. So when I found out about that, I was really interested. And he knew, either by word of mouth and different people, they began to tell and share what places were great to shop, places to eat, places you can lodge and stay overnight and all that good stuff. Mr. Green did all that information. Again, first it was just in the New York, as we say, the tri-state area, New York, New Jersey area. But the word of mouth got out real quick about this book. It started to spread. As you can see, it started to spread, and there was a company called Exo, which is now Exxon. Exo used to actually allow, if a person of color came up with whatever the monies and wanted to have a service station or a business, they allowed them to purchase the business through them. So you had, quote, colored gas stations. So once that came about, Mr. Green decided what better place to sell my books or get my guides out, but to connect with some of the gas stations that were welcoming people of color. So I thought that was quite interesting to have black-owned businesses and hook up with that. This man was a brilliant, I think, business person, and we can take a lot of lessons from him.
We told you that sometime during the program we would tell you the secret word. The secret word is travel. Travel. Put that in your mission as the secret word, and you'll receive 500 points towards your summer reading program.
These are just some examples of some of the people that actually opened up businesses. And we're talking about Memphis, Tennessee, back in the 40s and 50s. And that's kind of unheard of. It's a big deal today for a person to own a gas station. So just imagine a big deal in the 40s and 50s to have an ownership of that sort. So I thought that was quite interesting. There were actually businessmen that were of color that worked for Exxon. Until, I guess, my left, those are executives that worked for Exxon at the time. And the picture, the other diagram, is a picture of a family deciding to purchase a car of some sort there. So that was saying that they can have a piece of that American dream. Even though that pie wasn't equally divided, they could at least have some of it. So we're moving in the right direction, as they say. The best thing about this, it started back in 1936. And I'm not sure of any other publication that had almost a 30-year run. Imagine 30 years of publishing. There's something that started in just New York area, that began in the New York area, and by the time that the publication stopped, I believe it was in 1966 was the last publication. 1966 was the last publication. Now, they were not only in the United States, but it had expanded to the Bahamas, Bermuda, Europe. It's amazing. Again, no internet. You couldn't Google these things. He actually had people working for him, and they had to go to these particular places, every location, every place in here. Someone actually had to make sure, because it was a matter of life and death. It was no fake news here. Everything in here had to be true, because if a person went to a certain area and found themselves in a sundown town after sundown, and you're saying that this location, and then you get to this location and it doesn't exist, there's a problem. That would be a problem. So he hired individuals from different states, and they actually went to each location. And I think that's wonderful, because we didn't have any, and it was word of mouth. You didn't have your Yep review and all those other things that we have today. Those things, people really had to depend on each other. So I think that's quite awesome. It started off called the Negro Motorist Green Book. That was the first name, but as time went on, the name changed to the Negro Travelers Green Book. As time went on in 1950, that's when they did a big name change. And at that time, it wasn't just limited to where you could go to get food or lodging or restaurants. It expanded. It told you where you can go and get your hair done, what's the best barber shops, all different types of businesses. And Mr. Green was such a great businessman. What else would he do? He opened up a travel agency. I mean, it makes sense. Open up a travel. Who else knew and had the contacts and knew where folks were welcomed but Mr. Green? And when Mr. Green said it, it was kind of like you kind of could rest a little bit more. You kind of like, well, I wonder if we're going to be welcome here, or we're going to get some resistance. We didn't want to go through all of that. You know, of course, when you save up your money, you want to go on vacation. You don't want to come back with, okay, we can't go, you're not welcome. Who wants to be bothered with that? So Mr. Green decided, let's put more information in here. Let's open up a travel business. A brilliant man, I think. It doesn't get his just due when we're talking about moguls and all that. So from 1936 to 1966, that's how long this publication went. It's amazing. It's amazing to me. Not only was he a travel agent, guess what? He was his own publisher. He was his own publisher. Every year he had at least 15,000 copies of his material bought. So it started off 75 cents, but by the time it ended, I think it might have been kind of $2 or something of that. And that was kind of high. That was kind of high at that time. So I know in our town, in Wilcox County, in Camden, not everybody had a green book or could afford a green book. What we did is if say my grandmother and my grandparents were called Mr. and Mrs. Kimmons, and they were educators down there. So the educators and the teachers and my grandparents were principals. If one person in the neighborhood was able to get the green book, they would share different knowledge with other people. So that was awesome. So, of course, not everybody had the 75 cents or $1 to spend on this book. But mom and grandpa, they would always share, do you know about this one? This is the place to go. You know, it was a word of mouth. And so everybody had their route. If they had family or friends in New York and in New Jersey, they knew everybody usually went the same route because it was worth it. It might not have been the fastest, but we wanted to go the safest route. So that's why that green book is so, so important. And learning our history to know that we didn't always have the ability to hop on a train or a plane and feel welcomed. And one of the reasons why this came to be, even though there were Jim Crow, lots of times our entertainers, our athletes, and different people, they were always requesting and asked to travel to different places. And when they got to travel with their band or with their team, if they were in a group of people of different backgrounds, the main folks can stay in the main great hotel, but the people that were of color had to find a hotel somewhere else to stay. So that's why the Green Book meant a whole lot. So you kind of had to coincide. If you're with a team or you with someone else, where would the quote Negro players or Negro person would stay? So it made a lot of difference of where you would be, how you could travel. We were okay to entertain with them, but they didn't want to feed us in the same place, or you had to be in the back of the in the kitchen maybe to get some food and whatnot. So we've come a long way. Now, one of the statements I wanted to end off with, one of the statements that Mr. Green mentioned, and I thought it was so profound as we're going through so many changes in our society today. He said, there will be a day sometime in the near future when the guide will not be, meaning his guide, will not be published. That is when we as a race will have equal rights and privileges in the United States. So he was hoping that there were going to be a day that this wouldn't be needed anymore. But it took 30 years to get to that point for the 1964 Civil Rights Act, where discrimination was illegal. But we know that discrimination goes on today. So even though the act was then in 1964, we still know that discrimination still goes on. The issue is for us to, as Dr. King said, learn to live together as brothers and sisters, or you die as fools. So we want to make sure that we keep on learning to live together and learn and celebrate each other's differences. Often people say, well, I don't see color. Well, if you don't see color, you can't see me. Because look at me, I got a lot of color on today, and it's beautiful. Everybody has something. So learn to celebrate the colors and celebrate our differences. So I just wanted to share that information with you, the history behind the Green Book, and do your digging. Come to the public library, look up some information. You can Google that, and I'm sure that these people here are wonderful. Of course, I'm a librarian, so I am partial to that. But librarians know a lot. They rock, as they say. I want you to make sure that you find out some information, things that you might not have known before. Let's seek it out at the library. And you don't have to physically come. You can log on to their website and then be happy and give them a call, and they'll be happy to assist you. Here are some of my references. And if you need for any reason to contact me, I can give you my email address. It's C, as in Charlcie, C Vann, VANN, @jsu.edu. I'll be happy to share with you the information that I receive. You can get some of the reprints of the Green Book is available on Amazon. My earliest one, I believe I got one from 1936. Was available. It is a reprint, but it still is interesting. And I actually looked up Anniston, Alabama, and I found a location of a place that welcomed people of color to stay overnight. So it was so interesting to find that information that it really worked. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Charlcie. What a great program. I'm sure you enjoyed it as much as I did. If you would like to see a replica of the Green Book, we will have it available in the Alabama room for you to look at. So we invite you to come down to the library. We are now open during our regular hours, and so we invite you to drop by. Our hours are Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 6, and Saturday and Sunday from 1:30 to 5. So we hope to see you here soon. Thanks. Bye.
Register for summer reading today at publiclibrary.cc/summerreading.